What is up, guys? Welcome to session 6 of Linux Bash Scripting Intermediate Level. As always, I am your instructor, Kevin Downs. Today, we're going to be talking about advanced input-output with streams. So last session, we learned some programming logic, and we covered conditional expressions, testing strings, testing options, numeric conditions, testing completion status, truth in corn and bash shells, the case statement, loops, while and until, and the for loop. Today, we're going to be covering redirection. We're going to be kind of reviewing that. Opening additional streams, redirection operators, inheriting and duplicating streams, caution with the exec command, and here document. So let's go ahead and get started with redirection review. So before the corn shell executes a command, it scans the command line for redirection characters. These special notations direct the shell to redirect input and output. Redirection characters can appear anywhere in a simple command or can precede or follow a command. They are not passed onto the invoked command. One of the most common places where you might want to send a program's output is to a file in the system. And this time by file, we mean a regular, basic, classic data file and not a Unix everything is a file, including your hardware file, okay? So we mean by this is a text file, okay? So in Unix and Linux, if you didn't know, everything is a file, right? Directories are files, hardwares are files, everything's a file pointing to something in the system, okay? But this time, when we say redirect to a file, we mean an actual file that you would look in and see, words or strings, values, stuff like that, okay? So the typical sense of a file. So in order to achieve this, you can imagine that we can use chaining mechanism described above. So we can let a program generate output through the standard output stream, then connect that stream, or redirect the output to the standard input stream of a program that creates a data file in the file system, and this would absolutely work. However, redirecting a data file is such a common operation that you don't need a separate end-of-chain program for it. Redirecting to file is built straight into the bourne shell through the following operators. So we have some nifty operators that are built straight into the shell as a utility. We can use these to redirect input and output. So the first one we have here is a greater than sign, okay? And in this case, this would redirect the output of process to the file data file. If it doesn't exist, it will create the file if necessary. And anything that's already in this file will be overwritten by the output of this command. And guys, that's super important to know. If you use this greater than symbol, it will overwrite everything in this file. Okay? Now, if you don't want to overwrite the file, we have this operator right here, which is append. A-P-P-E-N-D, append. So this will redirect the output of the process data file to the data file, and it will append it to the end of it. If necessary, again, if this is an empty file or the file doesn't exist, it will create it. But in this case, it will actually add the output of this to the end of this file. So it won't erase everything in the file. We also have another operand here, okay? And this will actually send the contents of the data file and redirect that to the contents of the process as input, okay? So it's actually taking everything in this and redirecting it to this as input. Okay? So here's some examples of that. We can redirect standard output to the file name. We can append to file name. We can also use the errors produced in Linux. So say I do ls, or I do a cat of a file, and the file doesn't exist. The Linux terminal would tell me cannot cat, file does not exist, right? You can actually redirect those errors using this symbol here, okay? Which is 2 greater than sign. You can also append errors. So 2 greater than, okay? One more way we can redirect is to use this and symbol. This will redirect both standard out and standard error to a file name. And this feature has been functional since Bash 4. So anything before Bash 4, you may not have this feature, but anything above Bash 4, you will have this feature. And you should all have that feature if you have the latest image downloaded. Okay. And just some more examples here, okay? So M is a file descriptor, okay? And it's going to default to 1 if not explicitly set. N is the file name. So file descriptor M is directed to N, okay? So this is the syntax of a redirect command, okay? Oops. Now if you want to redirect both error and output, you would use that AND symbol or ampersand symbol. Okay. And here we're going to go ahead and go through an example of this. So I'm going to write a script for this one. First thing we're going to do is we're going to echo this statement and redirect it to redirect.txt. Okay. And then we're going to do another echo statement. We're going to append it to redirect.txt. And then we're going to do a third echo statement that will also append. And then a fourth statement that won't do anything. So let's check that out on our virtual box. Excuse me. Give me 1 second. Need to log in here. There we go. Alright. So we're going to do a vim redirection.sh. Insert, we're going to start with a hash string. Okay, we're going to do echo. This is sent to log file redirect.txt. Okay. And we're going to redirect that to redirect.txt, okay? We're actually, this one symbol isn't necessary, so an important note, guys, is that, so 1 stands for the standard out, okay? 2 stands for standard error, and 0 is the terminal, okay? So when you see those numbers, that's what it's referring to. So 2 is error, 1 is the standard output, what you actually see posted on the screen, and 0 is the actual screen itself or the input. Okay, so that's kind of important to know. But so the 1's kind of implied when you use these symbols. You don't necessarily need to use it, so we're not going to use it here just because it's not necessary. Okay, we're going to go to our next line here. We're going to do another echo statement. Say this statement is appended to redirect.txt. We're going to use 2 greater than signs. Give the file name we want to redirect it to. Okay. So this is going to append it. So we should see this line at the end of this file after this line. We're going to do a third echo statement. We're going to append again. So this statement is also appended to redirect.txt. We use 2 greater than signs because we want to append or add it to the end of it. So we should see this line at the end of this file after this line. We're going to do one last echo statement. This statement is echoed to standard out and will not appear in redirect.txt. Okay. Oops. To fix that spelling error. Alright, let's go ahead and right click that. Oops. We're going to make it executable so I can run the script. And we're going to go and run that script. There you go. So we got that last statement right. This statement is echoed to standard out will not appear in the redirect.txt. Okay, because we didn't redirect it at all. Let's go ahead and cat that file. And sure enough, I'm sorry, I catted the wrong file. cat redirect .txt. There we go. So we saw the first one, right? That first one was a simple redirection. Okay. But then we saw the append. So it added that second line to the end of the file. Then it ran that third line, and it added that to the end of the file. And then it ran the fourth line in that script. And that was not a redirection, so it just put it out to the screen, okay? So you can kind of see how the redirection works there. In the next example, we're going to go ahead and do it on the command line to show you that we don't need to put it in a script. We can also do this on a command line, which is how it's typically used. Okay, so we're going to do a redirect of the standard error. We're going to do it one line at a time. So we're going to use bad command, so we're just going to use a command that doesn't exist and redirect that error to a file called error.txt. And then we're going to do it again, except we're going to append the error to an error.txt file. Okay, and then we're going to do a third command just to show you that it echoes a bad command. Okay. Alright, so we're going to just call it bad command, which doesn't exist. We're going to redirect that error to an error.txt. Okay. See, we didn't see anything that said, hey, I don't know what that is. So we're going to do it again. This time we're going to append. Actually, before we do that, let me go ahead and cat that error file just so you can see it. So there you go. It says, hey, I don't know what that command is. That command's not found. This time we're going to do it again. But we're going to append. So we should see it added to the end of it. And sure enough, it added it to the end of the file. Now, I spelled it wrong. But it doesn't matter, it's not a real command anyway, so it doesn't matter if I spelled it correctly. We're going to do it one more time, except this time we're just going to say bad command 3. There you go. That's just echoed to the screen. So guys, this is all it's doing. It's redirecting this error to this file, okay? Because we're using that to operator, okay? We're saying the errors. If I were to do the same thing, except instead of using to, I just use that append. You notice it comes back to our screen, right? Because this is an error message, not a typical standard out message, right? So to will only do it for error messages. All right, let's head back to our PowerPoint. So for input and output redirection, as you saw, we used the operators greater than, less than, double greater than, and double less than, and others to redirect standard files to other destinations. Pipes can be used to separate stages. So here's an example of multi-stage pipe. And guys, we've kind of talked about pipes before. We're going to briefly review it. So here we're finding the most visited sites from HTTP logs. Now, I haven't visited any websites and I don't have HTTP logs on my machine, so I can't show it to you, but I can explain it. So here we're zipping a file and we're naming it http logs.gzip. Excuse me. And we're sending that to a grep to look for the 200 expression or phrase inside of this file, okay? And then from there, we're using the cut-d command to cut some spacing from it, okay? And we're finding specific fields in it so that we're formatting it. And then we're kind of sorting the list here. And then we're finding any repeated lines and we're deleting them. And we're using a recursive sort. And we're sending that to a file called most frequent, okay? So as you know, pipe redirects the standard out and gives it into the standard in of the next thing. So the output of this gets to put into the input of this, which gets put into the output, which gets put in the input of this, which goes to output, which gets put into the input of this, and so on all the way through until we get to this point We have a recursive cert, and it sends all of this into the file most frequent. So it redirects all of that standard output into most frequent, okay? Now guys, if I were to get rid of this here and put a pipe in most frequent, it's not going to work, okay? Because it doesn't work the same. This is redirecting the output and feeding it into this file. Pipes are sending it into the standard input of the next thing, okay? In this case, this is not feeding into the standard input of this. It's actually sending it into this file, okay? So as you can see, you can use pipes in conjunction with these redirection symbols. So pipe, the general purpose of it is to process and command chaining tool. It's similar to this, but more general in effect. It's useful for chaining commands, scripts, files, and programs together. Okay, I can show you this example here. So we cat all files that end in .txt. We sort it. We find any repeated lines, get rid of them, and send them into a result file. Let's go ahead and check that one out. That one I can do. So I'm going to do an ls. You see we have a couple files here that end in .txt. Okay, I'm going to cat a couple of those just so you can see. So I got a couple files pre-built here. So we have some repeating lines in there. Okay, same as this one. We have some repeating lines in that one. Okay, so that unique command finds repeated lines and gets rid of them. Okay, I'm going to clear my screen just so we get a little space back here. So we're going to do cat star.txt. Now remember, this is meta character, so it's going to say find all files that end in .txt. We're going to pipe that to sort, and guys, like I said, sort sorts things alphabetically. Okay. We're going to use the unique command, so it's going to get rid of all repeated lines, and we're going to send that to a file called result-file. Now, if this file doesn't exist, it'll create it for me. And it looks like it works, so let's see. We're going to cat result.file or result-file. Yeah, sure enough. So we have those error.txt files there. We have that repeat 1, repeat 2. Okay, we have some other files that end in .txt. So we don't have any repeated commands here. And notice it's alphabetical. B, C, D, E, F, G, H, all the way up to T and then V. Okay? So this can be super handy if you're trying to find very specific information and make it very human friendly to read. Okay, so you can use pipes in conjunction with those redirection operators. So you can also combine multiple instances of input and output redirection into a single command line. So we can use two symbols in one line. So we have a command, less than, a file, greater than, an output file. Okay? So this file gets sent to this command, and then it gets redirected to an output file. Okay, or we can do it like this. We have an input file, command, and an output file. Okay, and as we saw before, we can do one command, two commands, three commands, and send that to an output file. Now guys, I'm going to show you the most common way to do this, or at least an example of how I use it typically. So typically how I'm going to use this command is I'm going to do a gzip, and then I'm going to do messages, that, and then I'm just going to name it messages dot 2020, and today's date is the 21st, so 09/21 dot gzip. Okay. Actually, let me actually go to that file. So let's do a cd/var/log messages. Do we have messages on here? Okay, we don't. Okay, so gzip messages. Now I'm just gonna type this file in here. This file doesn't exist in this case right now, but that's okay. We're gonna understand the purpose of it at least. Okay. So this is kind of how that double sign is used. So messages on a system is typically in var log messages, and it just contains all, error messages, log messages, and things like that. So this is usually a very large file that fills up fairly quickly on a system. So what I'd be doing in this command is I'm taking everything in messages, I'm zipping it through gzip, and then I'm sending that zip to a file called messages.20200921.gz. Now this number here, guys, is just the date, okay? So I want to kind of date this command so that anyone that comes and looks for these files knows, oh, okay, this is going to be all the messages on this date. So if I'm looking for anything around September 21st, 2020, it's probably in this zipped file, and I can extract it and find the files in there, okay? So that's all this number is. It's just the date in a year, month, day format. So again, it takes messages, everything in the file messages, puts it through gzip and zips it, and then it sends it to this file, okay? So that's how these two operators would be used. So that can be handy. You can do two things in one command line. You can also do multiple output streams and redirect it to one file. So here we say in ls with a -yz. We can append the output of that to a command log, command.log. And we can also capture the standard out of it. Okay, so you guys remember from an earlier slide that when we use this symbol, it takes both the standard error and standard output. Okay, so let's do that. Now notice -yz is not in an actual command or flag. So ls-yz, oops, let me get rid of all that. Okay, ls-yz, that's not a valid option, right? Those can't actually be used on ls. Those aren't appropriate flags. So if I do ls-yz, I redirect that and append it to a file called command.log, which doesn't exist, so it's going to create it for me. And then I redirect the error as well. Oops. Actually, let's go back. I don't think in var log messages, I don't think it's gonna let me do it in that particular directory. So let's do command.log. Oh, I see what I did. I put the 1 in the wrong place. That's why. Okay. There we go. And the command.log. And there you go. We see we ran the ls-yz, and it says, hey, invalid option y -y. Okay. And it says try ls. So it redirected and appended to this file that standard error and the standard output. Now, this is the error here, guys. That's an error message. This is not an error message. This is telling you, hey, you might want to look up the ls command and see what actual options and flags you can put on it. So that's why we had to use both of these redirections. We wanted the standard error and the standard output. We wanted both messages to go with it. So we had to do both options and redirections, okay? Now, if we do a similar thing, except we change the pattern of the redirections here, this is not going to give the same result, okay? So it outputs an error message, but it does not write to the file. So more precisely, the command output writes to the file, but the error message goes only to standard out. So if redirecting both standard out and standard error, the order of the commands makes a difference. Okay? Because here, you're essentially redirecting this part of it and appending it to this, okay? So you're kind of feeding this into this, which won't make sense. It's not going to work. And I'll show you that it won't work. So you have ls-yz, so redirect standard error and standard input and append to command.log. Before I do that, let me actually get rid of everything in command.log. Okay. Now guys, what I actually did just there is I said, hey, redirect nothing to command.log. So essentially it's keeping that file, but it's deleting everything inside of the file. So handy little trick with redirect, because now command.log is empty. Okay. So we're going to say ls-yz, redirect the error and standard input and append to command.log. Didn't work. See? It put it to the screen. Alright, so the order that you do these redirections absolutely matters. Okay, so you have to be careful with how you're ordering it.